Do you travel with a lot of devices like I do? Laptop, tablet, phone, Steam Deck, retro handheld, e-reader, sometimes even more. Do you have kids or are you traveling with other people? That's even more devices. It takes time to set up internet access on each device when you get to a hotel, and some hotels and most airlines charge per device for Wi-Fi. A few dollars per device adds up quick. Some devices struggle with captive portal logins too, requiring even more time and effort to get them working the way you want. And hotel or public Wi-Fi networks are not safe. They're prime targets for man-in-the-middle attacks and other tomfoolery. What happens when you're someplace with no internet at all? This all leads to the main question. What the heck is a travel home lab, and do you need one? To answer both of these questions, we're going to take a look at my travel home lab and what it does for me. The TLDR is that most people don't need this much and should scale their build to what they actually want or need. For most of you, a travel router alone will improve your tech setup exponentially. A setup like mine offers a lot of convenience and functionality for individuals and small groups or families on the go, including bringing a ton of services with you and making it easier to access whatever services you have running at home. And it's a fun little project to set up. If you think this is for you, scale your project to your needs. This one is perfectly suited to mine, although I do have some plans for future expansion and upgrades. My name is John, and this is my YouTube channel where I make videos about whatever I feel like. Today, I feel like walking you through my portable networking and server tech that I built for my various adventures. I'm not an expert on any of this. I'm just a normal dude with a little bit of tech savvy and a lot of curiosity who wanted to find a reliable way to address some tech issues I frequently encounter during my travels. My travel home lab consists of three primary components: a travel router, a mini PC to act as a server, and a portable hard drive for bulk storage. Also, because power consumption is a major concern when I'm adventuring, I wanted everything to be able to run on a single USB-C power delivery power source, including the ability to run from a power bank. It also needed to be useful without internet access for when I'm off-grid. All right, let's dig into this thing. The first component is the GL-iNet SFT1200 Opal Travel Router. This thing is awesome. It's a tiny AC 1200 gigabit router with dual-band Wi-Fi running a modified version of OpenWRT as its firmware. This thing packs a ton of features in a small, affordable package. It can function as a Wi-Fi repeater, as an access point, or even as the whole network infrastructure for a LAN when you don't have internet access. Plus, it has this little switch on the side to quickly switch between two modes that you can configure in software. On mine, I have it set up to turn my personal VPN on and off, so I can quickly and securely route all of my internet traffic back to my home network, guarding me from man-in-the-middle attacks or packet sniffing between my travel network and whatever public network I'm using to get internet access, while also making it super easy to access all the stuff on my home network, like my NAS. You can also configure this router to use different paid VPN service providers like NordVPN, or even use Tor instead. In addition to Wi-Fi, this Opal router has 3 gigabit RJ45 ports, so I can connect to the WAN port to whatever network is providing my network with internet and attach 2 wired devices of my own. This last port is where I keep my travel server connected. It also has a USB 2.0 Type A port, which you can use for cellular modems, wired cell phone tethering, or to attach a USB thumb drive to act as a network share. We'll come back to this port in a little bit. Finally, the USB-C port is for your power adapter. This thing sips power, drawing less than 5 watts in my testing, averaging only between 1 and 2 watts most of the time. And critically, it's powered via USB-C, so I don't even carry the power adapter for this. It's powered by this short USB-A to USB-C cable connected to my travel server. For most people, this little router alone is a huge upgrade to your travel tech. If you watch the rest of this video and think to yourself, I don't need all of that, then you should at least look at picking up just the router. I cannot express enough just how much easier this makes my travels. It's just such a huge convenience when I'm away from home. Now, this is not my first travel router. I've used one for about a decade. I started with a little Hutu TripMate that I mostly just used to add Wi-Fi to hotels back when they always seemed to have wired networking in their rooms and only had Wi-Fi in the lobby. Yeah, I know, I'm old. I also used it to make a network share with a USB thumb drive if I was traveling with a group. But I eventually added something else to that old router, a Raspberry Pi Zero W to run Pi-hole. You see, I love the Pi-hole project. I've used a Pi-hole since the early days, starting on this Raspberry Pi Model B, my first Pi. I'm still running multiple Pi-holes on actual Raspberry Pis in my home network, and I'm about to upgrade one of them. I'll make a whole video about that to show you why you need one. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to see that. But we'll save the details on my Pi-hole for that video. For this one, you just need to know that I wanted a Pi-hole for my Opal travel router too. At first, that just meant adding the Raspberry Pi Zero W to this. But because I'm me, I wanted more for this setup. That is where this comes into play, my travel server. This is a GMK-Tech Nuckbox G2. This is an absolutely tiny mini PC. There are a lot of mini PCs on the market, but I chose this one because I wanted something really small with Intel QuickSync that was really power efficient and uses USB-C power delivery for power. This thing was the best I could find at the time that fit that description for a reasonable cost. This device features a 12th gen Intel N100 processor with 4 cores and 4 threads and a max burst speed of 3.4 GHz, as well as 12 GB of DDR5 RAM at 4800 megatransfers per second. This RAM is soldered onto the board, so 12 gigs is all you're going to get, and it's unfortunately only single channel. But this configuration is really powerful for the form factor and considering its power consumption, which we'll detail shortly, so it works well for this use case. These units were available with a couple of different storage configurations. Mine is the 512 GB model. But this storage is user replaceable as the internal SSD is an M.2 2242 drive and the documentation states that it supports SSDs up to 2 TB. Additionally, this mini PC has Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2, and dual gigabit Ethernet. Note that this Wi-Fi card needed some additional setup when switching to Debian, but I did get it working pretty easily. The Nuckbox also has 3 USB 3.2 Gen 1 ports at 5 gigabits per second, 2 HDMI ports, and 1 DisplayPort 1.4 port, all capable of supporting 4K video at 60 Hz. The USB-C port is for power only, and there's also a 3.5mm headset jack. Finally, this device has active cooling with small air intakes on all 4 sides near the bottom, and a healthy exhaust port below the network ports. And it's a relatively quiet internal fan. When I carry this, I carry it as one unit, with the router on top, then the mini PC, and then a Seagate Backup Plus 5TB portable hard drive on the bottom, currently all just held together with some Velcro cable ties and wired up with the shortest cables I had. The Seagate hard drive is my bulk storage, which is also configured as an SMB or Samba share to access my files from my devices. The GMK-Tech Nuckbox G2 came with Windows 11 installed, but I immediately replaced that with Linux Mint Debian Edition and installed Casa OS to manage my Docker containers from a simple web interface, since this is running headless 99% of the time. I could have used a different software configuration to manage Docker, but this was quick and easy while also allowing me to retain functionality to use this as a conventional Linux workstation in a pinch. For services, I have a few things running on here via Docker. First and foremost is Pi-hole and Unbound, which I've already stated that I absolutely love and cannot live without. This provides DNS-based ad blocking for anything connected to my network, and I mirror my home block list using the Pi-hole's teleporter function. I don't need this if I'm routing everything through my home VPN, since my home Pi-hole would handle blocking, but I wanted a local option for when I'm not using the VPN for whatever reason. Next, I have a couple of local media streaming services running to stream media from the Seagate hard drive to any devices on the local network. This allows me to still have access to some of my media even if I don't have internet access or only have limited internet access. I use Jellyfin for streaming video files, Navidrome for music, Audio Bookshelf for audiobooks and podcasts, Calibri Web for ebooks, and Comga for comics and magazines. All of these services are set up and have their media pre-scraped, so everything works fine if my server is running as a local network with no internet access. For those of you who prefer Plex to Jellyfin, you could set that up instead. But I found that I often had issues with Plex when I tried to start this thing up and use it without any internet access at all. Jellyfin just worked, even 100% offline. I also keep the APK files for any associated apps for these services saved in the SMB share on the hard drive. So if I'm traveling with someone and they want to use an app but don't have it installed, they can easily sideload the app onto their Android device, even if there's no cell service or internet. Otherwise, you can access all of this through a browser. To make that easier, I'm running Homelab, which is a pretty great little custom landing page application. I can point my companions at the Homelab page and they can easily navigate to any of my apps. I'm also running Dashdot, which lets me put CPU and RAM utilization widgets on the Homelab page. For the media itself, I pick and choose what I'm going to load on here before each trip. Plus I have a few favorites I just always keep loaded. I'm not carrying a huge media library, but I've got a decent selection of my favorite movies and TV shows that I've ripped from my physical media, as well as some content that can keep others entertained and a bunch of reference materials. Doing it this way instead of loading media onto each individual device saves a ton of time and also uses substantially less storage space since I only need one copy of each file. Plus, I just don't want to fill my phone with a terabyte of media. Also, if you're traveling with children, load up their favorite show on this and you don't need to worry about losing access to Bluey or whatever if they break their tablet on the trip. I used to also travel with a Roku stick or an Amazon Fire TV stick pre-configured to access all of this, so I could just plug that into the hotel TV or my portable projector to access all of these streaming apps, but now I just use the HDMI port on the GMK Tech itself instead. Next up on here, I'm playing around with an app called ROM-M. This is a manager for retro video game emulation ROM files, but it also allows you to play some games directly in the web browser for older systems. I don't really use this for me so much, since I have my games on my RG353V or I play stuff on my Steam Deck. But this seemed like a really cool project I wanted to check out, and it gives me another option to respond with if I'm traveling with kids and they tell me that they're bored. These ROM files are also accessible directly in RetroArch, running on the mini PC itself, so if I want to hook that up to a hotel TV or my travel projector and jam some SNES classics with friends, I have that option. The next app on here is called VoiceChat. This is another one I'm toying around with. It's a web-based Discord or Slack alternative for small groups that works completely offline. It has an Android app too. A lot of my travel is to places that don't have any internet access at all, and sometimes even have limited or no cell reception, since I'm an amateur nature photographer and I love the outdoors and do a lot of camping. When I have this travel Homelab set up and running in my camper van, this app is meant to serve as a backup communication service with the other members of my party when there's no cell service or internet. I also use GMRS radios, but I wanted to try this out. Next is Kiwix Server. If you aren't familiar with Kiwix, I highly recommend checking it out. This is an app for serving ZIM files over the local network in a browser window, and there are also native apps available to read ZIM files locally on different devices. This is most commonly used as a way to have a backup of Wikipedia saved and accessible on your device, and that's exactly what I'm using it for. I have Wikipedia when I'm offline, so I can easily look up anything I need to while I'm out in the field. It isn't just Wikipedia though. There are a ton of free ZIM archives you can download to access through Kiwix, and I have a bunch of them on here for both reference and entertainment. Wikipedia, astronomy forums, medical resources, emergency preparedness documents, a ton of TED Talks, crash course videos, WikiHow, and other forum archives for technical reference materials. Between what I have on Kiwix and the ebooks I keep in my Calibri web server, I have an absurd amount of information available to me to look things up when I can't just Google it. Finally, we get to probably the most important app, SyncThing. I talked about SyncThing and a lot of these apps in my home server tour video, which you can check out here if you missed it, but this travel server is one of the other components that makes SyncThing so amazing for my workflow. SyncThing is a service that synchronizes whatever folders or directories you specify across whatever devices you specify. This is how I sync my game saves between my retro emulation handheld and my retro gaming console in my living room, for example. In the case of my travel Homelab, I have a shared folder on the external hard drive that is automatically synced to a folder on my home NAS. This is how I ingest my footage and process my photos while I'm traveling. I pop the SD card out of my camera and then upload my files to the shared drive on my travel Homelab. My travel Homelab will then automatically upload them to my home NAS once it has a connection. This works even when I don't always have an internet connection too. If I'm out in a national park for a few days, as an example, I can ingest my photos and videos to my travel server while I'm out. Then, when I get back to civilization and check into a hotel, I can power the travel Homelab back up, connect it to the internet, and activate my VPN connection. Then the travel server will automatically start uploading all of the photos to my home NAS, even if I just connect it and then leave. I don't have to manually do any of it. This way, when I get back to my home office and want to start editing, everything is already there and waiting for me. This saves me a ton of time. It also safeguards me against losing any of my data if something happens to this hard drive during my travels. That portable hard drive is 5 terabytes, and I've talked about a lot of stuff that is already on there in this video, but the truth is that more than 3 terabytes of that drive is always empty when I start my travels. And on a long trip, I can come close to filling that up with 45 megapixel raw photos and 4K or 6K video files if I do a lot of shooting. It would take me a long time to ingest and transfer all of that if I had to wait and do the whole trip's worth at once. And it would be challenging to stay organized. Setting it up like I've outlined here is a game changer for me. So those are the services that I'm running, but how do I actually run this thing? Well, when I put this together, I really prioritized power efficiency and making sure this whole thing can run off of a single USB-C power delivery power source. In my testing, the server plus the portable hard drive drew a max of 30 watts at startup and went under max load, but settled to between 7 and 9 watts at idle once all of my services were running, 8 to 11 watts once I added the router's power to its load via USB, and finally jumping up to 17 to 20 watts when under a reasonable load and transcoding video, occasionally spiking to 22 to 25 watts, as measured from the wall. Average power draw when using this whole setup with everything running under a light load but not actively streaming video, the whole travel Homelab fluctuated between 10 and 16 watts, averaging about 11 watts. This can all easily run off of my travel wall wart, which can also charge my phone and another USB device at the same time. In a pinch, I can also run this whole thing for a few hours off of my main travel power bank, which I talked about in my What's in My Packback video here. I'll often use this like that if I just need to access something or use an app for a few minutes, but letting the server idle with everything running, I find I get a little more than 4 hours of uptime on a full charge, less depending on how much of a load I put on it. Also, as I mentioned earlier, I have a camper van. My van has solar panels and a solar generator with USB-C power delivery built right into its battery system. Depending on what else I am powering in the van, this home server could theoretically run forever in the van if I get moderate sun on the solar panel or drive a little bit to recharge off of my alternator. Overall, this setup has been amazing. If I were to start over and do it again, I might have opted for the faster travel router and the GLINet Barrel instead of the Opal, but I don't really need Wi-Fi 6 and the 2.5 gigabit WAN port for this setup, so I don't think it's worth the upgrade and would probably still get the Opal. Also, GMK-Tech has switched from the N100 to the N150 processor on the new version of this Nutbox mini PC, the G2 Plus, which should give you a little more CPU performance, but everything else looks to be the same. That still seems to be the best mini PC available in this class that uses USB-C power delivery, so it's still what I think I'd go with today. If you're willing to rely on AC power, you have a ton of other options you could consider, but I think that the USB power really matters to maximize your portability. Finally, it would be better to use a USB SSD for the bulk storage rather than the Seagate drive I am using, since it's still a spinning metal mechanical drive inside. But the price difference for that amount of bulk storage makes it not worth it to me, especially at USB and gigabit Ethernet speeds, and I need a lot of storage. It would mostly just be a durability upgrade. If you don't need that much storage, you could just upgrade the internal SSD on the Nutbox to 2 terabytes and forgo USB storage altogether, or go with a smaller USB SSD. This thing also always changes and evolves as I decide to try different apps and new Docker containers. I'm sure I'll add new functions to this soon, and I also have some upgrade plans. I'd like to make this whole package look a little better and hopefully be a little more protected. I'm working on designing and 3D printing a housing that holds it all together in a neat package, better than this Velcro. But I'm new to 3D printing and I'm not satisfied with anything I've prototyped yet. Also, I mentioned earlier that the travel router has a USB port that can support some cellular modems. I found a 4G cellular USB modem that supposedly will work for this with a prepaid SIM card and this router. I plan on testing that out to see if I can get it working before my next long road trip. Even without any future upgrades, I'm incredibly satisfied with my travel Homelab build. It really is a great project and an incredible convenience when I'm on the road. If you're thinking about doing something similar, I've shared some links to the products I used or would consider using in the video description. Those include affiliate links, so if you buy anything using them, I may get a small commission, which helps support the channel. But nothing in this video is sponsored, and nobody paid me to make this. It's just a fun project I wanted to share. Are you thinking about building something similar? What would you do differently, or what would you change to improve my setup? What's your biggest tech annoyance while traveling? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I know it's annoying to ask, but I'd love it if making these videos could actually become at least financially self-sustaining to fund more projects in the future, and those likes and subscribes make a huge difference on the YouTube platform. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.